Hello buddy, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. Now, this battle is going to be a bit of a brutal brawl because the matchup is Norsca against Beastmen, and these factions in many ways are pretty comparable. Both are very rush-heavy factions. Both factions lack much in the way of range. Now, certainly they do have access to some ranged units. Norsca in the form of some short-ranged foot as well as cavalry skirmishers. Beastmen, of course, similar situation, but they do also have the Cygor as another potential alternate option. Norsca has some better armor options, where Beastmen do have some proper cavalry, that sort of thing. There's certainly some differences, but both factions do endorse this sort of a blitzing, fast-paced style of gameplay. And so I figured, well, the best way to approach this would probably be a lot of cav. However, I've kind of gotten a bit rusty and haven't been playing as much multiplayer as I probably should have been during the period that quick match battles were down. So I figured, you know what, let's play it with something a little more forgiving and go with a good old Minotaur mob, Minobus, and make it and see if we can make that work. Do something a little more simplistic. And so that's what we're going to be doing here. The map is Stir River, so it's kind of enables this. That's another reason I wanted to try out the Minotaurs, because Stir River, with these large hills, now granted, Beastmen cavalry can vanguard behind your opponent here, and Beastmen cavalry is pretty quick, but ultimately the fact of the matter is that these two rocky plateaus make it very difficult to get good cavalry maneuvers going on, and your opponent can sort of commit just like 2 spear units or something to the back line there and screen off decent cavalry effort. And so I really didn't want to allow that to happen. I figured, you know what, that's another reason Minotaurs could work here, and let's sort of just try to pile drive through the Norscan formation. Whether they bring Fimir, Mammoths, whatever, we're going to beat the crap out of them. So for my lord here, I'm going to be running Morgur, going simplistic. I was debating Malagor, but then figured, you know what, let's try the new and improved Occam's Mindrazor. And of course, Lord of Shadows is always a sort of decent lore, so instead we're going to be rolling with that. But Morgur coming in with full kit. Of course, he's got double summons of Chaos Spawn, and that's really nifty. Norscans have a lot of low armor troops, so against them, Chaos Spawn can really shine. Now, alongside him, as we mentioned, we do have a Lore of Shadows Bray Shaman. Now, the Bray Shaman is a very, very potent caster. In this situation, I brought Smoke and Mirrors. Probably a mistake. Should have probably stuck with just ditch this, because we're not going for a fast-paced method of gameplay here, so you don't need this. But we do have Melkoth's Miasma, of course, for the slows, and Enfeebling Foe to debuff enemy troops to make them more vulnerable to sniping, and Occam's Mindrazor, because that is going to be huge. We got a death ball of 3 units of Minotaurs, so being able to soup them up with 50% additional damage is going to be insane. When that weapon strength spikes to 165, things get really, really bloody very, very fast. Minotaurs can do some insane work. And, of course, we do have the Jagged Dagger. A little more Winds of Magic can go a long way, and because I'm going to be on a chariot here, I'm probably going to be diving in and out of melee continuously, and that is going to enable the Jagged Dagger to recharge. Now the front line, well, if you go with triple Minotaur, Butchers of Kalkengard, as well as double Minotaurs with shields, it doesn't leave much space for a proper front line. So the front line is where we've really skimped. 3 units of Ungor Spears, unshielded, and then 2 units of Goreherd. On recommendations from some of you guys, I've actually learned that Goreherds are actually rather decent. I didn't really used to use them very much, but I figured, you know what, let's see if we can get them to trade decently with, say, Berserkers. It's obviously going to be bloody and atrocious, and Goreherd will lose that sort of engagement by themselves, but they can certainly hit pretty hard in that situation. And I'm not too concerned about missile play, because it is Norsca we're talking about. Now, besides that, we do have quadruple Ungor Raiders. This was assuming my opponent was going to bring some Mammoths. I wanted to be ready, and so I did bring some Ungor Raiders. 4 units of them, very useful against the majority of Norscan infantry, very useful against Norscan skirmish cavalry, against which I don't have many tools here, so I really do want to have some sort of zoning tools, and useful against Mammoths. Certainly Mammoths do have 70 armor if your opponent brings more Mammoths, but the sheer quantity of missiles, if you've got 4 units of Ungor Raiders, will do the job ultimately. And finally, 2 units of Razor Gores. Now, this is another unit I've kind of been warming up to over time, and while the AP is kind of wasted against Norsca, it's generally difficult to not make this unit pay for itself, at least to an extent. The unit is pretty potent. It can hit like a truck on the charge, so as long as you get the charge off, it can generate a lot of value. So we're going to be bringing Razor Gores here and seeing if we can make them work. Now, for my opponent, he has decided to go with a similar sort of, I'd say, Death Starch build, though not quite as Death Starch as mine. Though he has done a slightly different approach here with the Beast of Tachnor Vanguard here, perhaps anticipating some Cygor play. I'm not entirely sure, maybe just looking to get a cheeky flank. Beast of Tachnor, the Regiment of Renowned Norseman Warhounds, are Vanguard deployed here and ready to go. Veteran C9, bonus for charge of 14, as well as Frenzy, makes these doggos quite the potent force. And they can definitely, honestly, against Beastmen, they're a disgustingly powerful unit. All Beastmen large units are badly armored. And with the, honestly, even the Sons of Goros, who have 70 armor, it's just not that good. So Beast of Tachnor can do massive damage to them. Personally, I like them comboed with other Norscan Cav or Pseudo-Cav, but even by themselves, they're a threat to anything the Beastmen field. Now, for his main line, though, my opponent has gone with Throg the Troll King. Unsurprising, Throg's a pretty solid choice in this matchup. He can beat the crap out of basically every Beastman Lord and Hero. With Frostbite, he can really restrict your opponent's maneuverability. You can prevent your opponent from escaping. Vomit, I don't think it's really worth it, honestly. It's very difficult to cast. 60-meter range Magic's Missile is very difficult to get value out of. But with Fight or Die, as well as Foe Seeker in there, he's definitely going to be a pretty disgusting threat. Alongside him, there is a Fimir Balefiend of Shadows coming in with only Penumbral Pendulum, which is quite shocking. My opponent did decide to keep the from the Mist, so kind of a weird decision making here. Smoke and Mirrors also sticking around. I don't think it's really valuable if you're just going for a quick sort of blitz against a faction that's probably not shooting very much. But and the fact that he didn't bring a cheap spell, I think, is a little bit of a mistake. Definitely, I think I'd drop some of these abilities just to get say Milkos Miasma in there, but perhaps just trying to get the most damage out of this guy as possible. And of course, the Fimir Balefiend is one of several Fimir. We also do have some Fimir Warriors with great weapons over here, as well as the Miststalkers over here. So with this sort of saturation, with Fimir everywhere except sort of the center here, my opponent is going to be able to apply that Armor Sundering effect, and if I, for example, had gone with the Bestigor front line, he would be able to weaken those Bestigors and make them much easier targets for the Marauder Berserkers, which make up his entire front line. 4 units of Zerks, as well as the Brutes of the Hound as a 5th unit of Marauder Berserkers. These guys are unbreakable, and causing fear on top of their already copious melee stats are going to be an absolute monster to deal with. Really not the unit I want to be dealing with, and with my cheap, trashy front line of a lot of lightly armored troops, this could go very badly. Now, behind that, we do have some Marauder Hunters, as well as some Marauder Hunters with Javelins. So these guys, interesting choice with Marauder Hunters. I'm not sure I would have really gone for these guys, but I do think the Javelins will perform rather well. Perhaps my opponent here looking to debuff my shields, perhaps anticipating the Minotaur play. And I didn't really think about it at the time, but these guys do have the Shield Breaker effect, which reduces enemy shield parry by 24%. So, or 24, I should say. It's not just a 24% debuff on your shield parry, but it will reduce these guys to a bronze shield and make them a much more juicy target for the Marauder Hunter with Javelin. And that could definitely be a terrifying prospect. Now, as you can see here, I'm going to split my hogs, and I was hoping to get the sort of flank, but I missed these Beasts of Tachnor. A split moment of sort of inattentiveness. And while I was focused on the Razor Gores on the left flank, on my left flank, these Razor Gores here got caught out by the Beasts of Tachnor, and this is a bit of a disaster. Beasts of Tachnor have a monster's bonus for large. As we mentioned before, they do have some great weapon strength. These poor Razor Gores only have 45 armor, and they didn't get their charge off, so they're not going to be able to do meaningful damage here. They're going to get torn to shreds. I did start moving my Lord of Shadows caster. I didn't want to break formation here, and as I do that, my opponent, as I'm starting to focus over here on this fight, trying to swing troops around, trying to micro these hogs around the flank, my opponent drops a beautiful Penumbral Pendulum here, smashing my poor Ungor spears, and just scything down the line and demolishing those poor sort of poor Beastmen and half-breeds there, and these guys just falling apart very, very quickly. So that was definitely some brutal stuff there. Well played to my opponent, just opening the battle with a bang, and making me kind of sad, because for the price of two hounds, I've lost an entire unit of Razor Gore and an entire unit of Ungor Spear. So I'm already down about 1,000 gold going into this fight for essentially just Winds of Magic cost for my opponent. But I'm going to poke here a little forward with my infantry, looking to zone, following up with Ungor Raiders. And I figured, you know what? My opponent got some poke, but we're going to poke back. And the Ungor Raiders are going to do a lot of damage here. Marauder Berserks, 15 armor, not really worth very much against this Hail of Fire. And you can see just how much damage the Ungor Raiders are able to do very, very quickly. Already these Marauder Berserks are down about 1,800 HP, which is pretty terrifying. Actually, now it's more like 2,000. So, definitely some brutal stuff. In the meantime, my opponent here posturing with these troops, and with this funnel, he's not able to get full value out of his mob of infantry. So, because I've got this narrower front, I'm able to sort of make do in this very tight corridor, and now we're going to charge forward with the Minotaurs, looking to plow through and engage in the center. In the meantime, over here, the poor hogs are trying to get up sort of flanks. They're trying to position here, but my opponent is moving these Miststalkers to interdict, which definitely dropped. Another Penumbral Pendulum going down, and I was too slow. I did start moving these Ungor Raiders, but not fast enough, and they did get clobbered, as did these guys. Definitely some brutal stuff, but I didn't go to the Minotaurs with shields, as well as the Butchers of Kalkengard, diving into these Zerks alongside Morgar Shadowgate and going after Throg, who has popped Fight or Die. In come the Spears in the meantime. With the Berserker charge being broken, they are going to engage there. Unfortunately, though, these Minotaurs getting debuffed, those throwing axes, dropping their armor significantly and weakening them greatly against these Marauder Hunters, the Marauder Hunters over here as well. We can see this unit of Berserkers here completely melted, and Chaos Spawn have taken their place, so that is going to help me a huge amount, debuffing these guys and beating the crap out of them. In the meantime, though, bit of a misplay here on my opponent's part. He's let Throg get it, so Throg got stuck in here trying to beat up Morgar, which I understand. But now he's stuck in, and Morgar's going to be whittling him down, poisoning him, slowing him, weakening him. And in the meantime, the Minotaur's buffed up with that Occam's Miners, going up to 166 weapon strength, demolishing Throg. In the meantime, the Beasts of Tashnar here swinging around, trying to get into my backline, seeing that juiciness there. But these Minotaurs, I kept them in reserve. I knew Beasts of Tashnar were lurking around, so I kept the Minotaurs in reserve. And now they're going to pivot here and engage, while my opponent's Berserks, as well as Miststalkers, are still bogged down by these trashy Emperor Spears. Over here, the Razor Gore, unfortunately, you get caught out by the Miststalkers, so that is a bit of a disaster. But the Miststalkers at least being kept out of the fray. Right now, if Terror was on the front here, things could be looking much, much more grim. But because there is no Terror, the Gore Herd, as well as the Ungor Spears, able to stick around and perform much better. Over here, Malkaus Miasma does go down the Beast of Tashnar. The Way Shaman, mounted on a chariot as he is, actually does get that bonus for his infantry here. And with the Minotaur diving in, these poor beasts are not in for a good day. They are going to get mauled and demolished and really, really have a terrible time of it. In the pits here, in the meantime, we do see the Marauder Hunters, Javelins, actually pushing into melee, trying to support Throg. I think my opponent was trying to extricate Throg here, and it just isn't working. In the meantime, the Minotaurs are swarming them, even as Javelins pour in from all sides, so that is definitely a bit of a bloodbath on both sides. But with the fact that those Beasts of Tashnar were now cleared up, we are able to swing around with our caster and look to get into this backline. You can see some of the Minotaurs there zoning away from Marauder Hunters, and we are able to sort of pressure them away. Unfortunately, though, Butchers of Kalkengard down to 8 models, these Minotaurs down to 6, getting bludgeoned. Throg, though, also suffering, down to 1900 HP. Keep in mind, Throg doesn't have the best armor. 55 armor is nothing to write home about, really. And so, Morgar, with his respectable 400 weapon strength, is going to be doing some hurt. And we do get a summon of Chaos Spawn, which I'd completely forgotten about until this point. And that is going to be able to dive in here and pressure these Marauder Hunters with Javelins and keep them off my Minotaurs. Unfortunately, too little too late. This really should have been done much, much earlier, but, you know, you do what you can. And these Marauder Hunters are now going to have a terrible time because they're 15 armor. They do not stand a chance against that 130 weapon strength. Over here in the meantime, Throg bogged down, Foeseeker going off, but the Butchers of Kalkengard not giving an inch, stuck in there alongside the Ungor Spears, whittling him down. Keep in mind, Ungor Spears once again hitting pretty hard against this bad boy, whittling him down. Over here, the Ray Shaman does finally tie down this backline, so very well played to myself there, I think, being able to finally compromise his backline, something I should have done ages ago and just flunked that, so, you know, I gotta pat myself on the back for at least doing something several minutes into the game. But my opponent, though, does lose Throg here, so that is a big, big problem. We are going to put the Bray Shaman rear in gear and have him pursue. Unfortunately for me, though, my opponent has now butchered my front line. My front line is gone, and my opponent has done a great job zoning these Razor Gores out. So honestly, that was really well played from him, just getting rid of the Razor Gores and sort of preventing me from getting good flanks. Over here, I'm hell-bent on getting Throg off the field. I do not want Throg coming back. I do not want him as a threat. Another great Penumbral Pin. Actually, I said great, but it wasn't actually kind of whiffed. I think my opponent anticipated me to move back. Not entirely sure what that was for, but Penumbral Pendulum goes off. It's very little. Minotaur with shields here down to 3 models, trying to pull away from the Fimir and allow the Ungor Spears to do more damage. But Fimir just not having it. Fimir are really brutal combatants. I don't have AP missiles, so with 110 armor plus the potential for missile resist, when their leadership is good, makes them really, really beefy and tough to deal with. Same thing over here. We can see the Brutes of the Hound. These guys do have 37 speed as opposed to the 36 on Ungor Raiders when they lose their trait. So these guys can actually catch up. And so that's definitely pretty brutal. Butchers of Kalkengard here, though, diving in against the Fimir Warriors, looking to get that rear charge. And they are going to be able to sort of lay the smackdown on these guys. These weird amphibians are sort of starting to bleed here. But they do have the great weapons, so they do have that bonus for large, and the Butchers are going to start feeling the heat as they turn around, as these Berserkers engage from the rear. So it's been a sort of setup of flank and counter-flank continuously. I do finally get rid of Throg, so that is definitely a big win for me, able to get rid of him. But unfortunately, my Bray Shaman, who is really one of the big things propping up my balance of power right now, is way out of position. So that is definitely a huge issue. Over here, we do get in on top of the Fimir Warriors with great weapons. They do get terror routed by the Butchers of Kalkengard, though not before routing the Butchers themselves. So these guys down to 200 some HP. Granted, regenning, but with one model, it doesn't really matter very much. And the Familiar Balefiend now diving in to the Ungor Raiders and harassing them and really pressuring them. So balance of power right now, pretty handily in my favor. But keep in mind, my opponent's army is nowhere near done. We do still see 2 units of Zerks. One of them, the Brutes of the Hound, who are unbreakable. We do see the Regiment of Renowned Miststalkers. And we do see this Familiar Balefiend. And that is definitely still quite a force to be reckoned with, even without Throg. And there are actually some Rallying Marauder Javelins as well. So it's not like my opponent's out of this fight yet. Most of the troops I have left are trash. Fortunately for me, though, because I have so many archers, we're going to be able to do those pro-Space Marine splits right out of StarCraft and start gunning down these Berserkers. And as they try to close the gap here, they're going to get gunned down. Unfortunately, some of them do get caught. What can you do? Sometimes you do lose a Marine here or there to some of those Banelings, and that's what's happening here. These poor Ungor Marines are not having a good day. Zerks, though, are getting whittled down. They are slowly but surely bleeding that HP. We are swinging our chariot around, looking to get that rear charge. Keep in mind, these guys are not immune to psychology once their frenzy is down, so the fear will actually kick in and will help get rid of these guys. And with that continuous pressure from these Ungor Raiders, they're going to rampage, and ultimately, they should rout here. Now, unfortunately, the Miststalkers, though, coming back in with a full 12 models, looking to get re-engaged here, as well as these Marauder Hunters trying to re-engage here and save this Familiar Balefiend. But unfortunately, the Familiar Balefiend here gets caught out. I hit it with an enfeebling foe, and then surrounded with Ungor Spears, and so we remove these valuable units from play. These Zerks also do get routed off, so some huge wins there, and suddenly the balance of power is swinging much more decisively in our favor, and things are looking up. Now, the Miststalkers here are sort of grouping up. They don't have much of a hope here. The Brutes of the Hound did remove my archers from play, but at this point, one of the big problems for my opponent was that while he certainly won that front line fight very effectively, now he's found himself separated and split up. Marauder Hunters not really sure which way to go, trying to get into the fray from this angle. Miststalkers now getting caught out. Keep in mind, my opponent can't really run because I do still have the chariot around, and it is still a threat. Now, these Miststalkers here looking to dive in. Fortunately, the Ungor Raiders in this very weird, long sort of rectangle formation instead of sort of spread out broadwise. But, oh well, what can you do? Ungor Spears here will absorb the charge pretty efficiently, and I do pop Call of Violence to keep these guys in, because I don't want the Ungor Spears to rout and then cause a chain rout, because Miststalkers, of course, do cause terror. We do dive in here. We're going to whittle these guys down. We're going to hit them with poison, hopefully from Mortar. In comes the chariot from behind, getting that beautiful rear charge. So these guys still, though, at 12 models, so showing that monstrous resilience on the Miststalkers here. I actually have not picked a single model off these guys, which is nuts, and they are well under half health. So definitely some insane resilience, but at this point, balance of power is actually going to shift decisively out of my opponent's favor, and his army actually shatters, which actually surprised me a little bit. I hadn't expected that. At this point, it's going to be a little bit of cleanup. My opponent simply sits here in the corner with the Brutes of the Hound. I knew that his troops were somewhere back here, and so I decided to send everything over. I knew at this point, with 47 models left on the field, there's no way my opponent's going to be able to win that. So it's going to be a little bit of cleanup in our line here. We're going to send the Bray Shaman over to clean these guys up. I wasn't able to spot them at first. Once I couldn't see them down here, I decided that they're probably still in the woods. And well, that's what we're going to be doing here, diving in. And yeah, it's going to be a bit of back and forth. I hit him with a Malkos Miasma, completely unnecessary. One of the cool things I think is worth seeing here is these guys were at like 47 models going in. Look at how fast these models bleed off as the Bray Shaman plows into them. That is the glorious feature of heroic chariots. They kill models like no problem. One of the things I think a lot of people don't realize is that this monstrous weapon strength on these guys is split up between 4 models on each hit, and the chariot is basically hitting as long as it's plowing through the unit. So before my opponent GG's out there, we actually whittle that unit down by about 30 models within just 3 charges, which is insane. So basically 10 models to the charge. But was this a great build for me? Absolutely not. I think some of the game here definitely boiled out. It was a bit of a comedy of errors, I think. My opponent, I think, played a much better game than I did early on. But I think in the long run, his units getting split up and separated hurt him a lot, as did the fact that he hadn't really invested in mobile forces. His army was pretty darn static. So with this build, obviously huge misplays early on. I lost to 2 Razor Gore Herds for basically nothing. Neither unit got a charge off. There's legitimately like nothing to discuss here. They got dumpstered. And I got 2 kills on Beast Attachment. So this was essentially 1,100 down the drain. Massive misplays on my part. We let an entire unit of Ungor Spears get deleted by a Penumbral Pendulum. 133 kills on the Premier Balefiend basically tells the story right there. Yeah, that was a huge loss. Let my archers get hit by the Penumbral Pendulum later. So that was just nasty, and some major misplays on my part, just slipping up on the micro. At the same time, I do think the core of the strat, the Minotaurs, did actually perform rather well, especially with Oakum's Mind Raid. They just bludgeoned their way through Zerks, through Throg, and completely dumpstered the Troll King, breaking the back of my opponent's army, really. I do think if my opponent had the Miststalkers in there earlier, this battle might have swung pretty decisively in his favor. The lack of... if he had Terror in that fight, a lot of these Gors and Ungors, who did at least some okay trading into the Zerks, would not have been able to do so, and it would have probably been enough to swing the match. In the meantime, well, the Archers did great. Ungor Raiders performing incredibly well against the Brutes of the Hound and the Zerks, and later able to sort of split and weave. The Brave Shaman, I think, performed rather well. I always like Brave Shaman on a chariot is just one of the, in my opinion, one of the best heroes you can get, because you get a caster and a very strong damaging hero. And honestly, bring 2 Brave Shamans is not a bad choice either, in my opinion. You can easily bring 2 Brave Shamans on chariots and just get those 2 heroic chariots. Racking up those 80 kills is nice. Most of that was against, well, maybe not most, a good chunk of it was against Marauder Hunters, but then a lot of it at the end, towards the end, was against Berserkers, so it can definitely do some major work there. Definitely would recommend it. Now, for my opponent, like I said, the biggest flaw, in my opinion, was the Miststalkers sort of getting way out of position. And by the time they did engage, the battle had sort of shifted far away. And so the Miststalkers had this very long hike they had to engage in. They spent so much time chasing that unit of Razor Gores, which was just not worth it. Even though they took out the Razor Gores for basically no damage themselves, it just wasn't worth it in the long run. Some great play with the Marauder Hunters, but I do think there were some awkward moments where my opponent pushed the Marauder Hunters into the fray, where he really should have just kept whittling down the Minotaurs. He was doing a great job. At the same time, I kind of screwed up because I didn't shut... I could have easily summoned, at least gotten that summon off with Morgar much sooner into the game, and potentially kept these Minotaurs in the fray much longer. So definitely some big misplays there on my part. Definitely some misplays on my opponent's part, feeding those Marauder Hunters into the fight. Letting Throg get isolated. I think my opponent should have really tried to keep some infantry alongside Throg. Maybe Death started up. I get that he was trying to spread out and get the maximum amount of coverage of sort of the armor sundering from the Fimir Warriors, but I think having, honestly, a core of like the Brutes of the Hound, Throg, and then Fimir Warriors with great weapons or Miststalkers would have been an insanely powerful Death Star that I would have struggled to break. Because Terror would have been kicking in. The Brutes of the Hound would have just been massacring Minotaurs, honestly, and mulching my infantry, escorting and everything. And of course, Throg as well as the Fimir would have just been that great anchor. So I think that was a little bit of misplay there on my part, my opponent's part. I think he could have, once he saw the battle line, he could have probably reshuffled his troops a little bit, tried to engage more appropriately, and I think that did screw him over in this matchup. But besides that, well, yeah, lack of mobility was really the big killer. When it came to that late game chase against the Ungor Raiders, he just didn't have the tools to chase. He didn't have the tools to pursue, and it hurt a lot. Zerks are a strong option, but I don't think going this heavily all in is worth it. I think you should try to bring some Marauder Horsemen or some Hounds or something to provide that backline harass, even if you're not investing into like cavalry style build. Because obviously your range is probably not going to be able to go toe-to-toe with Beastman range, because you are outranged by that 20 plus meters. Definitely some misplays on both sides. I should have done a much better job with my Razor Gores, especially. Could have helped me so much in shutting down my opponent's line, backline. My opponent, I think, definitely could have been a little better at sort of targeting units with this. At the units he was targeting with the Marauder Hunters, and definitely needed some better control of the Miststalkers. But well played to Grim Brindle there. Do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you found it a bit entertaining and fun, if you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and share. If you have any comments, critiques, questions, requests, as usual, don't hesitate to put them down below, and I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.